The year was 2016, it was the height of X-Wing 1.0 popularity, and I launched a product on Kickstarter. I want to tell you guys about my experience today. Roll the intro. Welcome to Corner Case, you're in the hobby corner. I'm your host, your man with the plan, your best friend, Deck. And so today is my true identity reveal. I cannot hide it any longer. You have all seen me before. I've been hoping it wasn't true, but I know I've probably been recognized. That's right, I'm the guy who did the Kickstarter that one time. My company name was Gatai. The product in question was called Flight Deck, and what it was just a card organizer for X-Wing. Cards were the way you built your list, and when you wanted to show people your list at tournaments, there wasn't really like a clean way of doing that besides just like switching sides, and also just like the portability of like the different size cards. So it kind of just managed all of that. So today I want to talk about why did I do it, how did I do it, and more importantly too, like why did I stop? The number one reason why I did that Kickstarter and why I launched that product was it was just kind of a natural part of my fun during that time in X-Wing. I just really enjoyed kitting out my whole gaming experience. So back then I was playing X-Wing like 2 times a week, and then once a month I was going to a tournament. I was like really active playing, and so all those little pain points kind of stack up when you play that. And at the same time, I was customizing my own tokens. In a previous video, you might have seen my carry setup. I have the cantilevering toolbox that I cut my own custom foam and attached like on the top this fake leather kind of material for that luxury look. I was providing some of these to tournament organizers as well. And so the cards were kind of like the big pain point. Obviously, you could just like print out your list from like a squad builder, but I didn't like that experience as much as like being able to like see the pictures and read the cards like by hand. There's like that tactile element of the game that I liked. So I did a lot of options to try and like solve this problem for myself. I had this like one really fun option that I was using for a while that was like these blocks with little magnets in them, and they would snap together, and then they would like put your cards in a row depending on how many cards you have. Thought that was pretty fun. So it was just a natural part of my fun, like kitting out my own organization for this pretty tokens heavy, stuff heavy game that felt like it should be more portable. That kind of brings me to like my second reason I did all this stuff is I just like building the community. I'm pretty vocal that big motivation for me in this channel is to build the gaming culture and community up with you guys. And the same was true back then, like 5 or 6 years ago, whenever that was. I mentioned earlier that I was cutting my own custom tokens and I was providing those to TOs, you know, so at least some of the local TOs would be running tournaments. They'd ask me for prize support, and it's not like I charge them money for it because I actually want to contribute as much as a TO, but not in that way. Like herding the cats isn't like something I'm super interested in, but you know, like making something, I can do that. I can support that way. Very specifically, our local TO, Bernie, was organizing what he was calling like the Sweet 16 tournament, which was like an invitational tournament for people who were going to regionals, and he wanted a special prize, if I recall correctly, for that tournament. And I had this idea that I wanted to solve the cards. Kind of those two things came together, and that's kind of how the product was born. The third reason that I did this was eventually I want my whole life to be about games, and so at the time I figured what better way to do that than to start a business. In my day job as an industrial designer, you know, developing product comes like really naturally. I already knew that part of the business. For the market size of this gaming group, like X-Wing players, I figured the market size was only so big that grassroots was actually probably the best way. So, you know, I had my friends using the product, they would be going to tournaments in other states, and that was like probably the best way. You know, obviously you could do Instagram and stuff, but the community wasn't so big that I felt like I needed to do a big marketing spend. So really I could just focus on the product and on getting the campaign done in time. Without sounding like a dick, hopefully not sounding like a dick, I feel like what I'm saying is it was kind of easy. Let's talk about how I did it, and that's kind of what I want to talk about is how I built and designed the product. Even back then I had access to 3D printing and laser cutting and access to like the real materials for manufacturing. And back then they had this business, I think it's out of business now, called Tech Shop, and it was kind of like a gym membership. You had access to a full maker space. If I needed to be flexible, I could also use that space. Prototyping just came really easy back then. In terms of the actual product design, obviously I wanted to streamline the experience of like carrying the cards, but I was also really concerned about like the size of this product. I've talked before on the channel about how you could carry your whole X-Wing list in like a lunchbox, and I think you could even fit it into like a Magic the Gathering fat pack box if you wanted, and that's like really small. So I knew that whatever I was making to carry these cards needed to fold down like pretty small. I wanted like the vertical orientation for the cards. That was like easier for me to read. I don't have to like look down necessarily, and you could put it off to the side, so that saves table space, but that also requires like some level of stiffness. Then the cards themselves, kind of the storage capacity drove the overall size because you need to accommodate for like the maximum size list. So that would be like 8 cards, 8 full-size cards. And then back then, oh my goodness, I think it was like the Dengar meta or whatever back then. Oh my god. I tested it with versions of just like, I think it was Dengar and like 18 upgrades or whatever the hell people were putting on that thing back then. I had to test like the maximum storage requirement and still try to keep the form factor down, because you can fit all these cards in a certain form factor, but they might not be legible. And that's the other thing, is the pocket sizes needed to be managed so that the titles were still legible. And so I made a lot of prototypes to solve these. Probably the hardest part was the little tombstone number markers. So if you have like a swarm or whatever, you have your like 1, 2, 3, 4 markers or whatever. Those were like really hard to store because they were like 2-3 millimeters thick, and they were going to stretch out the pockets. And on top of that, like being able to store this like tiny little thing, like grab onto it, and then the person can still see the number on it. I had to do a lot of prototyping to solve that problem. No stretching, even though it's hella thick. People can still see the number even though it's hella tiny, and you got to grab onto like basically nothing, and it doesn't fall out when you close the folio. So that thing, a little bit of cost went into solving that thing, let me tell you. So that was a lot of prototyping, and all of it, for the most part, after that first paper prototype, was done in like the real manufacturing materials. And suffice it to say, more than enough work, I think, went into making this product good. Now, my biggest regret is not being able to include the magnetic closure that I wanted. So for those of you who own this product, it has the Velcro closure on the back. So in order to keep the slimness down and the user experience like pretty smooth, Velcro was the best option that I could afford at the time. I sold through like 750 units of the product, so I only ordered a little bit over that, like 800 units total. And at that size of an order, I don't really have influence over the factory's cost to me. Maybe if I was buying like 10,000 units plus, maybe I'd get like a slight price break. But the reality was, it was my first product launch. I didn't want to skimp out on the quality of it. So like I said, I tried way too hard to solve problems that people aren't even thinking about. So the magnets ended up being really expensive. I had to cost down to Velcro. Biggest regret. I will say there are other things that happened that were beneficial. For example, I'm not going into retail, so I don't need retail packaging. So the few cents that would have gone into, and the industry calls this like a belly band, a little strip of cardboard or plastic that just goes around the product with all the graphics on it. So I didn't have to buy that because I already knew that my cost structure was not going to work at retail. So I put that money into a deck box instead for the damage deck. And I was really happy to do that, you know, because that was more value for the consumer, which is definitely like my priority, is like trying to make this game like a better experience. And of course, like I probably could have like just pocketed those like 10 cents or whatever, but I'm bad at business. Which actually leads me to the next topic, which is why I stopped. I mean, I'm making a joke that I'm bad at business. I definitely am probably better now than I was back then, but really it has a lot more to do with like the cost structure was just really tough, and I didn't think the business was sustainable. That business only worked because I was going to direct to consumer. If I were to distribute more widely, it would mean going to game stores. But think about like what that costs. Like they cut the pie like 4 ways in a gaming retail. So the factory sells it to me, I sell it to the distributor sells it to the game stores individually, and then the game stores sell it to you. So if I want to make the product that I think is actually the right quality, I'm actually not going to be able to make it. Even though my product at that time looked like it was of the same construction quality as a brand like Dex Protection or the Cut Sew from Ultra Pro, I can tell you that a lot of those have like paperboard on the inside, which means they're eventually going to fall apart. What went into the flight deck was a much better product, better durability over the lifetime than other products of a similar construction in the game store environment. And I did not want to ship a product that was of that quality no matter what. It was better for me to just not do the business than to make that type of a product that was going to make money, but I knew deep down wasn't going to survive long term. The next thing is actually the total market size. You know, I didn't think that market size was too big. So I sold through 750 units. And I can't tell exactly why I felt this at the time, but I didn't think that the market for like X-Wing accessories had that much life left in it. I launched the flight deck in time for Worlds of that year, like 2016. And after that, I did kind of feel like it was petering out. At least I didn't have the confidence to place another PO of like 500 units because I really thought that X-Wing might actually like die out before that happened. It was like really felt like the community was kind of forcing themselves to stay together a little bit during that time. Especially, it might have been the Dengar meta that was like making me feel that way. The Jumpmaster meta, sorry, that's what it was called. Obviously, big changes were on the horizon. I didn't feel comfortable with my cost structure long term. You know, if I did place a PO of like 500 units, like I'm spending all my time marketing, which is like not what I want to do. I want to be making stuff. It just sounded like I did this once. I wasn't going to force it to work. And ultimately, I don't want like one of those accessories businesses like Broken Egg. I like what all those accessory businesses are doing, and I appreciate what they do for the hobby. Big secret weapon fan big secret weapon fan, but that just wasn't for me. I wanted to make something a little different. And at that time, I was still discovering what that was. I think I know better now, building the community with you guys on this channel. Long term, I have other plans, but at that time, 5 or 6 years ago, I was still starting to discover that. So that was the rise and fall of Gatai Gaming's flight deck for nobody who wanted this product or asked for it, and nobody asked for or wanted this video either, but here it is. I hope for those of you who are interested in contributing to the community with your creativity, if you have any questions or ideas you want to bounce off of us, like love talking about that kind of stuff. As you can see, I love talking shop. I'm basically begging you all to talk shop with me. So just leave us a note in the comment. If you hated your Gatai flight deck experience, send us that in the comments too. Smash that dislike. But if you did like it, thank you for liking it. We worked really hard on it. Thanks for swinging by. Please like and subscribe. We're always desperate, and we'll see you next time.
I am ready to subscribe again.